Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. Now, today I have a few familiar faces on here. Both guys have came on Crime and Entertainment. Red was one of our first guests when we first started this thing, and we appreciated him coming down. Charles' episode is actually getting released on Sunday. Was released on Sunday, excuse me, but this is a special episode that we got going. We've got Charles and Red here today to go over a few things where some differences of opinion might be, in order here. And these guys are kind of talk and give their stories because they were both involved heavily in Chicago in the outfit, knew a lot of the same people. But as you know, in these types of circles, some people can have different opinions on certain people, depending on how your relationship was. So to start off, Red, welcome to Crime and Entertainment. Charles, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment as well. Hope you guys are doing good.
We're doing great, Wade. And it's Chuck, please. And Red, it's finally a pleasure to talk to you and meet you face to face.
So to speak.
So to speak.
Yeah, via Zoom. So look, I know, Red, you had told me in conversation that when you were on Scott Bernstein's podcast, that you had misspoken and said that you had knew Chuck previously, but you said that you had kind of misspoke on that. You want to elaborate on that real quick?
I don't remember exactly what I said, but I do know that he was asking me a run-on question. It had like 5 questions in a sentence. And I was trying to get to the meat of the question. And I said, yeah, okay, on this one. Okay, on that one. Okay. Because I wanted to get to the meat of it. I didn't do it deliberately, but I did say that I had met Chuck and I knew Chuck, and I really hadn't. So I was wrong.
Red.
And if that offends you, Chuck, I apologize.
No, Red, like we talked a little bit off air, that didn't offend me. What offends me, and it's more me than it is even you. I have to correct these fugazi people. And for those of us that aren't Italian, it's these phony guys that are out there that haven't done what you did, haven't done what I did, haven't been around the people we've been around. And they go out there and they talk like paper assholes. And that's the only way I can really explain it. Because I was sitting listening to the podcast, and I can see where you came from thinking that I would lie for Joe Lombardo, not knowing my background. And I called, Scott Bernstein on it. And I told Scott, I said, Scott, I see what Red probably sees in the media, but he does not know me. He does not have any idea what the background was with me and Joey for real. Very few people did. What's this guy thinking? And then since Wade got involved and we've talked, I'm sorry if I got a little agitated with it, but it's not just you. You got to understand, Red, where they opened up the golden gates for you, for 21 years, I've had to fight through them. And we know all the same people. We know Joey, we knew Mikey, we knew Frank's. I knew Frank Sr. through my dad. And all I ask is look at it from my point of view here. If you were sitting in the chair other than the chair you sat in, and you were on the opposite end of that table, and you had a guy that said he knew what I knew, and it was a difference of whether you did your time at ADX Florence or you did any time at all, would you not want me heard?
I don't know. I really don't know.
That's fair.
It depends. There's a lot of people out there telling stories that I don't like, so I don't watch them. That's my way.
I know. Well, I've done a show with Wade, and now man to man, face to face. I'm going to tell you, we've got some close friends or people that we know that we both respect highly. I know John Rotuno very well. I know Jimmy Grady very well.
Did you call John? Did you call John?
I have not talked to Johnny in probably 10 years. He retired, and John went to bat for me. Red.
John is now with Homeland Security.
John is probably one of the best people I ever met. There's things that are going to come out. He protected my mother and stepfather. He protected me. And I know you like Mitch as a person. And I'm, like I said in something recently, I'm never going to disparage Mitch Mars as a man. My problem with him is a prosecutor. And what you and I both know what the value of intelligence is. And you and I both know how the CIA work. We know how Homeland works. We know how ATF works. We both really know how the Bureau works. Rotuno busted his ass to prove my case, and he couldn't even understand why every door we went to, we got a roadblock from Mitch Mars. Pat King busted his ass to try to come to something in 2001. We didn't know they were talking to Junior. We didn't know that Nick was going to roll. All we knew is that one of the names that I mentioned lit everybody up like a firecracker, and it was shut it down, send Chuck back to Florida. He's full of shit. I got told, don't ever mention this. Don't ever talk about it again. We'll put your whole family under the federal prison. This was in 01, Red. This is when we were out there. There was videotape. We were in the woods. We were ready to bring up Albergo. It ain't no secret. Now, things that you may know a little bit about, and I may know a little bit about, when Hambone went on the run, he came to certain people. You know where the Peacock's at, right?
Yeah.
Okay, he's at Addison and Harlem, and I'm at a meeting. I was a young boy, and this was right before he disappeared. And a certain individual who's no longer alive gave him some money. I sat there for the conversation, and he said, "We better never see you again." Now, everybody said, Whitey Bulger's dead. Whitey Bulger's this, Whitey Bulger's that. I know for a fact, Red, and the only thing standing between me and proving it is digging a hole out in Evans Field, because he went on the run.
You're talking about Hambone, right?
Michael Albergo.
Yeah. Do you want to hear about Hambone?
I'd love to hear your end of it. I mean, I don't want to taint my testimony, but I can tell you what I know, and you probably know more than me.
It was sometime, oh, wow. I did a bedtime story.
71.
Yeah, I did a bedtime story on it. A cop that I knew, Jim Schiffer, came to me. He was dating Hambone's daughter, and she was in the neighborhood. And he asked me, he said, "Can you find out if she's ever going to hear from her father again?" And I said, "I'll do what I can, but I can't guarantee anything." So when I was over in the neighborhood, I went to Jimmy Kozo's father-in-law, Lamato. And I said, "Phil," I said, "do you ever hear the name Hambone?" And he said, "Where'd you hear that?" And I said, "Somebody asked me about him." And he smiled at me and he looked at me and he said, and I'm going to give the gesture, "They didn't even find a thumbnail from that guy." And he smiled at me when he said it. And he said, "I figured that was it." So I went back and told the cop, Jim Schiffer. I said, "Jim," I said, "I don't think you're ever going to hear from him again. He's gone."
Here's what I was a young guy, so I didn't know the particulars when he disappeared. I found out it was 86 when I found out the truth. I get a call from a certain guy. He's an ex-Chicago cop. Well, he was a Chicago policeman. He's dead now. And tells me, "Hey, I need you to meet me at Evans Field," which was a spot we used. And I said, "Okay." And he says, "I got a couple of bags we need to dispose of." Okay, nothing new to me. You know, I did things like this all the time for them guys back in those days.
How old were you then?
In 86, I was in my 20s. I
Okay.
was just getting involved. And because I was a deputy and I was working with the deputy, probably a good friend of yours. You remember Igor?
No.
Okay, see, that's why our worlds kind of went parallel. A guy really a lot like you stepped up to the plate in he'd always been there in the 60s, 70s, but in the 80s, he became a heavyweight. His name was Louis Del Medico. They called him Igor. And long story short, that was my introduction into becoming, more actively involved in things. And I was at the meeting. I got the phone call from Joe, and he said, it wasn't Joe Lombardo, it was another Joe. And he said, "Meet me at Evans Field. We need to go put something away." So they dug a couple of holes. They put these two bags in the holes. And I says, "What's going on?" And that's when the name, they called them Bones back then. And Joey says, This is Bones. He goes, this motherfucker got told to go away and stay away and never be seen again. And he come back with his hand out and he got what he had coming to him. Now, Red, like I told Johnny in '01, do I know what's in that hole? Do I know what DNA is in that hole? No, I have no way of knowing, but I know that there's something there. And when they wanted to go out and get it, and our friend Mr. Mars heard the name Bones out of me, and Johnny came back and brought me the picture. This is in '01. And I said, yeah, that's the guy. I remember seeing his face. It didn't look that good when I saw him, but I remember seeing the face. That's when Mars started to shut me down, Red. And I mean, he shut me down every way and everywhere he could. Now, I didn't know what was going on. Rotuno spent thousands of hours investigating me, and you know John's no slouch. Never.
No,
is,
he's
never.
not. No, he's not. And one thing I would have to ask you is during this process, I assume that that's why you wanted a public defender or an attorney before you went into court. You wanted somebody to represent you because you were coming up with information and they weren't going to give you immunity.
Well, no, they gave it to me, actually. Here's what happened. When there was another issue that John wanted some information on, when he approached me in Florida in '01, it was about a building that blew up on the northwest side that was called R.D. Marvilli and Associates, Bobby
Yes,
Marvilli.
I know about it. John and I talked about it. John was down by me in '01 too.
Pardon?
John was by me in '01 too.
Okay. When
He had my home. He used to come to my home all the time.
When he started working that case, and it's not a secret now because both my mother and stepfather are dead. My mom and stepfather were the rock behind that case because they both worked for Bobby Marvilli. My stepdad was the guy that moved the desk out the day that a couple days before Marvilli blew that whole east wall out of that building. Okay, because it was an antique desk that he wanted to keep. And my mother ran advertising for Bobby. I got the reports here. I think I gave them away already. If not, I'll get them to him.
Mm-hmm.
And John was interested in that and ended up talking to me through a mutual friend of ours, an attorney named Tom Freeman. And when Tom heard my story, he said, Chuck, I got somebody you can trust. I want you to talk to. And John and I started talking. You know how the routine goes. He's vetting me. I'm vetting him. We're feeling each other out. Finally, John got enough dots that connected together, and they brought me up from Florida. When they hid me out into DuPage County Jail, they put me under an alias. You know how that goes.
No, I don't.
Well, they brought me in, put me into DuPage County Jail, flew me up on the Illinois governor's plane with the state police escort, the ATF escort, Jimmy Grady, John Rotuno, and I lost count of how many other guys were with them.
I know the team.
And we landed at Central DuPage. They took me over to DuPage County. They booked me in as Charles Wallace. You can go through DuPage County's website. You can't find a case for Charles Wallace or Charles Miceli anywhere. It doesn't exist, but I was there. I got court records to prove it. They brought me in. Pat King and I sat down. Mitch Mars personally wrote my proffer. He didn't know what I was going to all say. And Wade's got a copy of it, and it's in the secrets file. Mitch personally wrote my proffer. Turn around. I sat down, and I had two attorneys. I had a guy that was a public defender out there in DuPage, and I had a private attorney named Mark Wolf, pretty top flight guy out of DuPage. And when they got done debriefing me before I even talked to Pat King and Mitch Mars, they're like, Chuck, we need to do a roadmap with a court reporter with you. There's so much here from, you remember Jack Novelli? Did you ever meet him?
No.
He was the guy in the sheriff's office that was selling all the jobs for O'Grady. And he came in under Elrod, and he stayed under O'Grady. When O'Grady came in and turned our sheriff's department into a currency exchange, he burned 3 friends of mine. Does the name Dom Erdo mean anything to you?
No.
Trip Trucking? Okay, those were all South Side people. Dom's granddaughter was one of the ones that bought a job from Novelli, and she lost her job. Now, do you know, I know you know Rocky D'Ambrosio.
No, I don't.
Okay, Rocky was a bank robber. That's Rocky's daughter. So there was a lot of heat coming down from what Novelli was doing. The U.S. attorney and the U.S. Marshal served me that, with the Shackman Act, and they wanted to talk to me, and I told the truth. I said, yeah.
Shackman decree?
Yeah, it was part of Shackman. And they come up to me and they said, how did you get your job? How did these other people get their job? And I was so pissed off at Novelli at that point. He wasn't a made guy. He was burning people into family left and right. And I told the truth. 1990, this was, Red. In 1990, I gave statements to the FBI. We wired up. We went into Igor's barber shop to get Deleo on tape and to get Novelli on tape. Did the whole 9 yards. U.S. attorney turned it down, not enough evidence. 2 fucking years later, Red, under case 92 CR 89, I think it is, they indict Novelli for everything I said he was doing, served me with a grand jury subpoena. Soon as he found out I was an unindicted co-conspirator, he pled guilty on my birthday. He took 18 months and went to Terre Haute. But I'm not credible. Now, I work with, what's his name? Scott Levin on that case. Now, what people are all saying is, I'm a liar. Okay. 90, I tell the truth. They call me a liar. 92, they indict Novelli. 95, I go away. This black guy admits that he murdered a white woman, left her laying in the street in Rock Island, Red, for dead. They did like a rock cocaine for sex thing. She wanted to go further. He wanted to go further. She said no. He kicked her, beat her to death, and killed her. The police department did a good job out there, but they didn't have enough evidence to charge this guy. And this moron comes to me at Sheridan Correctional and says, hey, how do I beat DNA evidence? I hear you're really good with the law. And much like you, when you were wiring up your apartment, I got 29 questions answered by this piece of shit. I called up the RIPD and said, hey, are you investigating the murder of Pamela Strauss? I says, I need to talk to a detective right now. Well, who is this? I said, my name is Chuck Miceli. I'm at Sheridan Correctional. And the lady kind of like laughed on the phone. She goes, are you for real? I said, get a detective on the phone right now. They were down there within 3 days. To make a long story short, because this is a segment all itself, I went to the grand jury. I went to a suppression hearing. I went to the first trial, was hung by 1 juror, which we think took a payoff. Went to the second trial within 30 days and put this piece of shit away for 2 life sentences. He's been up for appeal all the way to the Supreme Court and lost. And he tried to suppress my testimony. That was in 97, 98. I meet Johnny in 01. Johnny writes a letter. I've been verified in being involved in over 40 acts of violence, intimidation, murder, extortion, arson. And Rotuno writes the letter. The minute we mention Hambone's name, all that goes away. I'm a piece of shit. They send me back to Florida. Now, while I was in Florida, had a coincidence. Guy came to me, said that he murdered his girlfriend, zipped her up, put her in a suitcase, threw her in Pensacola Bay. I assisted them with that. My word was
Pensacola's right by me here.
Yeah.
Pensacola's right by me here.
That was you probably know then he was a seaman. His name was Zachary Littleton. He's the one that got the girl pregnant while he was married, and he didn't want his wife to find out. He was at the end. He was at NAS Pensacola.
No.
And you can look it up, but it's the just look up Zachary Littleton. So anyway, I get letters from the prosecutor there. While I'm still there, a guy named Willard Crowder, who claimed himself to be some kind of a half-assed white supremacist, admits to me he raped a woman on New Year's Eve in the Walmart in Pensacola. He got 25 years. So Red is a reasonable guy between 90 and 14, well, 13, 14, about 12. I've done all these things, but I'm not credible enough in 05 when Rick Halpern walks in there and says, hey, I got all these letters. Chuck Miceli's filed this letter. Bring them. Don't bring me into the trial. Bring me before a grand jury. Bring me in camera. Send somebody down to interrogate me. What did they do? They denied the motion for an attorney. They send Mike Mesa down there. Excuse, my dogs are playing. They send Mike Mesa down there, and I tell Mike the story. Mike tells me, and he gives me his word, which now I know isn't worth very much. I tell him about the roadmap with Mark Wolf. He goes back to Chicago and he promises me, the last thing Mesa said to me walking out the door, Red, was, if this deposition that you gave Rotuno, Bear, stop. I hope you can edit that out, Wade. The last thing he said is, if this deposition you gave Rotuno has one iota of what you just told me in it, he said, I'll be back to get you within 48 hours. Mark Wolf will tell you, in his entire practice in law, he's never had an FBI agent come in and ask him to open his client files to a federal agent. I signed a waiver, take the files, the deposition disappeared. The court reporter that did it in DuPage County got silenced. The copies that were on file in the public defender's office mysteriously got destroyed. And then I fought, which you may or may not know about, when I got the newspaper article in 2005 about Joey being indicted for Albergo, Joey being indicted, and Jimmy being indicted for Spilatro, and some other things, and I'm seeing it, and I'm knowing what I know, especially about Seifert. I'm scratching my head, and I recant myself for Joey being indicted about Seifert. And then I'm looking at what was going on with Albergo, and I'm looking at what they were saying about what was going on with Spilatro. Well, you and I both know there was a name missing there, and we both know who that name was, John DeFranzo. And then I look at it from the Seifert end of it, and I said, well, where's Rick Medea? Where's Tom Schreiber? If they think they got this case all wrapped up, they don't know nothing. And I'm the only person, Red, that I've ever seen. I aggravated Zegel so much. I think it was in July 24th, 06. He issues an evidentiary order calling me out. He says, Chucky, Mr. Miceli, give me an evidentiary affidavit with reasons of what you'll bring to this case if I allow you to intervene. Red, I sent him back an affidavit like this with exhibits. Now, you tell me if this is justice or not. You've been in enough courtrooms.
I don't think it's justice. What I think is they didn't want to have it part of family secrets. It could be a state case. It actually could be a state case.
Red, what do you think about DeFranzo not being mentioned? Do you think he was involved in that and was left out for some reason?
I know he was. I know for a fact.
You guys are in agreement on that.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
What about the other name that you mentioned, Chuck?
Rick Medea?
Rick Medea. That's the cop that you told me that you thought might have been the one that made the phone call to Tony to come for that meet.
Spilatro's wife and daughter. I know it was Rick Medea. He was my uncle's father-in-law. Just as much as I know the guy that actually pulled the trigger on Danny Seifert. And by the way, happy birthday, Joey. Today's Joey's birthday.
Happy birthday.
I know for a fact that Rick Medea was the one that pumped the shot actually into Danny. I can't say right now why I know or how I know, because I'm praying to God that they'll actually do something when all this media starts getting some ebb and flow. But Red is absolutely right. They left DeFranzo out because, as Red will tell you, like we talked about in the first one, Red, there's a way up to the FBI section in the building, in the Dirksen building, that nobody would ever know you're up there. Am I correct?
I used to come in the elevator from downstairs parking, and I would go up, I think it was the 8th floor.
What did I tell you the other day, Wade?
I'd go up to the 8th floor, and then I'd make myself comfortable there, and eventually I'd go up to the U.S. Attorney's office up there. Yeah. I believe
Red,
it was.
Without knowing it, you just confirmed what I told Wade. And my last thing, when I was a young deputy, or before I was a deputy, I was a car hiker for the sheriff's department. And, we used to do like a mail run. Well, I was on that floor, and I saw DeFranzo come off the elevator and go in those doors in the 80s. So you and I know the same thing.
Do you guys have any difference of opinion on who was involved in the Danny Seaford hit?
I don't know. I don't know what Red thinks about it.
Red, tell us what tell us the players that you think were involved in that particular hit, your version of how you think, or how the best of your knowledge of how it went down. And then Chuck, we'll get your take on it.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, Joey's the one that ordered the hit. And
talking
it was
Joey
done,
Lombardo, right?
Yes, it was done. Joey Lombardo, JL, I'll call him.
Right.
JL. That's what we call him.
Well, we got Joey Seaford, and we got a lot of these names.
Got a lot of Joeys.
I want to make sure the audience knows.
There's no JL, Joey Lombardo.
Yeah.
So there's no other JLs involved. But JL actually ordered the hit. And the reason he did, or murder, whatever you want to call it, you call it a hit, you call it a murder, I don't care. Somebody's going to die. But he actually ordered it because Danny would not go in and take the time. He would not plead guilty to the income tax evasion, which he was guilty of. And don't forget, he took mob money. He took 30% of the skim that they got from that Tony went out to Las Vegas with, and put it into his business. And now all of a sudden he got banged, and guess what? He's gonna spill the beans on everybody else because he doesn't want to go to jail, but he didn't want to go into witness protection.
Well, see, you're right. You're right from what here's my take on it, Red. I was only an 8-year-old kid. I wasn't nowhere near at your level with that, obviously, in 74.
I used to go into the office at American Bonding. They had a big easel up there. I talked about it in Family Secrets, and Rick Halpern went crazy because I said there was a big easel on the wall, and it was talking about the 1.4 million skim, and they were trying to. He had Weenie World going, which was hot dog stands. Irv Weiner did. He had all this money that they were putting out on the street to wash it and make it legit. And Danny, I believe, was one of the carpenters that worked for Weiner when they were putting these things together. And then eventually they went into what they went into.
So who do you think was there that day when the hit went down on Danny?
I know Frank Schweiss was. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Joey was there, but Joey actually didn't get involved in the murder. He stayed in the, as far as I know.
Thank you. Finally, somebody with the truth.
He stayed in the bathroom. Chuck, it doesn't make any difference. They had him for conspiracy. They had him for racketeering.
I know.
They had him for everything. He was going down. He winked at me when we were in court. When they said, do you see him here? And I looked around at all those people. I just didn't see him. And I turned around and said, no, I don't. So Mitch bought me up a photograph of him. And it was an old photograph from 1980. And I said, okay. And I'm looking around. He stood up and he winked at me. He had a twinkle in his eye, kind of a grin on his face.
I know that.
And I said, that's him right over there. He looked a whole lot better the last time I saw him. And everybody burst out.
And the hair. And
no, he didn't have the beard, but his.
No, I know. I said, but then when he was on the run,
I never saw him like that. I saw pictures of that later. I saw pictures of that on the wanted poster and stuff like that. The only thing I saw him, he'd lost a lot of weight. I think he had a quad or a triple bypass, and he had a very expensive suit on, but it was like maybe 5 sizes too big.
He was hanging on him. I know.
So that's what I really know. What I know as far as the people that were there. I was never told Tony was there. Tony and I never discussed business, period. But I do know that Joey was there. There was somebody else there. I'm trying to think of his name right now. I can't. But the original plan was to kidnap him, take him away from the scene, grab him, snatch him, and go. And he struggled. He struggled. And I believe he was shot in the side of the face with a pistol. And then Schweiss put one in his leg with something that you're familiar with, a 22. It didn't have a silencer on it, but it was 22. And then he ran. Even though he was wounded, he ran. He tried to get into different places, whatever. I don't know. I wasn't there. But
he ran out the door and he got clipped out in front.
then Schweiss went over and put the shotgun to his head and did him in. Now Spilotro was there. Pardon?
Wasn't Schweiss. Let me tell you something, Red. This
Tell
is
me about
my Uncle Tommy was married to Rick Medea's daughter. Okay. Rick Medea was a dirty Chicago cop. He's still alive. I'll be just like you and me. I'll meet that guy anytime, any place, anywhere. Rick was tied into everybody, and Rick got the call. My uncle was like a do boy. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit it. God rest his soul. He was a wannabe. That day, my uncle just happened to be babysitting me, and my uncle wasn't the sharpest tool in the drawer. As much as I love him, he wasn't. A lot of the guys weren't back in those days. Threw me in the back of his car with a blanket, a bottle of pop, and some candy, and said, "Lay down, don't say a goddamn word. Don't pick your head up till I get back in this car." And he parked down the block. We made a stop somewhere, which I know now, years later, was at Rick Medea's house. They picked up shotguns and they went out to Bensonville. Beccarata was there, Schweiss was there, Spilotro was there. I can't, just like you, I can't honestly say that I know Joey was inside there because I didn't see Joey inside there. And at that age, I knew Joey very well.
He went through the back door. He went through the back door and he grabbed
Emma
and Joey, little Joe.
Right. Well, nobody expected little Joey to be there. And like I've even told you, like, you know, Joe Seifert and I are good friends. And I told Joey, we might be splitting hairs over this, but Joey even agrees with me that if Lumpy was there that day, it was for one reason only, and that was to protect Emma. Because you know, and I know, Schweiss, Beccarata, and Calabrese,
I
and
sort of wiped everybody out. That's it. He doesn't leave.
they don't leave witnesses. Exactly. And you know that. You know that better than I know that. And that was part of what caused the war later on, you know, because, you know, Tony especially was pushing that they wanted to go finish Emma off. They didn't want any witnesses around.
I don't know that.
I heard from.
You heard something. You're speculating. You heard something because
I heard something from somebody who would know that Tony wanted Emma gone. Period.
Why don't you name them?
Pardon me?
Why don't you name them then?
Louis Del Medico and Jimmy Deleo.
Really?
Yeah. Because, and I'm going to go one step further because I really don't give a rat's ass about Jimmy Deleo. You remember Hoagies?
Sure do.
Who ended up owning Hoagies right after Spilotro died?
I believe his wife got muscled there, if I'm not mistaken.
His wife got it, but what happened to it after she got it?
I said, I believe his wife got muscled after.
Yeah. You know who muscled her?
No.
Bruce
Really don't.
Shoemaker and Jimmy Deleo. You know how I know? Because I was like this with Deleo at the time. I was with Deleo. I was with Banks. I was out of the 36th Ward. I was in Jake's Pizza is what they ended up naming it. Pretty much almost 5 out of 7 nights of the week once they opened it up. Jimmy had a front man named Bruce Shoemaker. Okay. But that was Jimmy D's place. And Jimmy owned it. And he couldn't really like all the currency exchanges Jimmy owned. And he was on whatever that Commerce Commission was with the Illinois State Representatives. And that's another one.
Commerce Commission, Illinois Commerce Commission.
And he sat on something where he couldn't own currencies, but he owned them in other people's names. Because I don't know if you remember J.J. Banks. He was the old man. He was the father to the alderman, the judge, and the lawyer, Ronnie Sam and Billy. And I was out at 36. Okay, that's where I cut my teeth in that ward. I was around Louis Del Medico. I was there through the O'Grady days when they were selling jobs, and I got my job. You know, I got my job, Red.
We're selling jobs way before that, guy. Way before that. Back in Jim.
Oh, I know that.
You go all the way back. Yeah, Thompson. You go all the way back.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the one thing I'll interject right here was I was listening to a podcast over this weekend, and they were talking about, I don't want to name it wrong because I think there was actually two of them, but was it like an Operation Greylord? They took down a lot of people in there.
Yes.
I heard it on Scott Bernstein's podcast, who I plugged.
That was about Bob Cooley.
Yes, Bob Cooley, the
Bob
mob
Cooley.
lawyer, mob fixer, if you will, of Chicago.
He knew everybody.
Yes, that's what they
Red,
said.
I'll throw a name out because he's dead. You remember, oh my God, what was his name? He was that famous, Leonard Timponi?
No, did not know.
The
guys I knew were like people I used to hang out with over at Kozo's, Jimmy Kozo's place. That's where Joey hung out. They moved from American Bonding to Kozo's compound over in the Patch. And I used to get off the Kennedy Expressway on Racine. It was an exit only. You couldn't get on there. And I used to come up back through that way. They'd push a button for me to drive in. I'd drive in, they'd shut the door. As a matter of fact, Jimmy stole that the alley from the city of Chicago. He put up a wall on it.
Hey, were you ever by, not Calabrese, by Angelo Lepitra's house?
Never.
Do you know where it's at?
No, not really.
It's down in China. Well, it's down in Chinatown in the old neighborhood, but they got two houses that are like identical bungalows tied together on a corner lot. I laid tile in that house when I was 19 years old. And now I got all these guys saying that I don't know anybody. I didn't do. You and I both know, Red. Do you walk in a house? Forget it's me, forget it's you. Just with your vast knowledge, do you walk in a house like Angelo Lepitra's house and just be anybody around his family?
No, the guys are different. I didn't know Angelo. Okay. I did not know the man.
Yeah.
But some people are different. Some people will invite you into their home.
Right.
Some people will do certain things. I invited people into my home. A lot of things. A lot of people
Yeah,
came.
we know you did, right?
Yeah, you got some tapes to back that up for sure.
You got the tapes to back it up, Red.
Now,
that's
how old were you when Tony Spilotro got taken out? How old were you at that time?
I was in my 30s.
You were in your third. Well, Chuck, how old were you?
I was 21.
21. Okay, so now Red, you said you had a pretty decent relationship with Tony, but you guys never discussed business. It wasn't business.
Never. Oh, we drink scotch together, have a good time, and we talk about women, but we never talk about anything else.
So now your portrayal or your opinion of his portrayal in Casino was maybe a little bit off as far as temperament wise, or again, like me and Chuck has discussed too, different people have different relationships. If you knew him non-business, he might have been a certain way to you because business wasn't involved. But for someone like, Chuck or someone else who he knew him business wise, he could have had a whole different, attitude. But as far as your opinion of Tony just being friends, non-business, did you think that portrayal of Pesci in Casino was a little bit off?
Way off. I never saw him lose his temper. I don't know anybody that saw him lose his temper ever. I've never talked to anybody that, like Anthony DiMartini, he said he waited on him. He said he was the nicest guy, easygoing guy, and a big tipper. He always had a smile on his face. So I don't know anybody, and he never raised his voice around me, even when he bought me that Lincoln. He just went over there and said, "Come on, kid, we're getting the car." And we went over to Barron's Lincoln Mercury. And that was supposed to be Jackie Cerrone's nephew. He said he was anyway, Al Bianca. Mm-hmm. He's probably alive today. If you're out there, Al, and you hear this, give me a call. At any rate, he had an attitude problem, and Tony just kind of straightened it out. He knew who Tony was when he walked through the door.
Mm-hmm. By the way, Red, I don't know if the news caught up with you. Did you know Pat?
Yes, I did. No, I did not know him. I saw what I gotta be careful here. What I did was I saw the obit the day after it went into the paper.
Yeah, he passed away today.
Today?
I think it was today or yesterday. I saw something.
He passed away. He passed away on the 25th. On the 25th.
Was it the 25th?
Today's the first of the month. So that's 6 days ago.
Who you're referring to?
Yeah, I just saw it and I looked at it. I didn't look at the date, but I heard Dr. Spilotro just passed away.
And who is that?
I'll let you
That's
tell him, Red.
Tony's brother. That's Tony's older brother. And
Okay.
it's an interesting thing because
Wasn't he a
never-
lawyer?
No, he was a dentist.
Oh,
As
Dennis.
a matter of fact, Joey Lombardo used to go to him to have his teeth worked on. He was going to him. And Pat was kind of, he testified in court. Pat was kind of trying to get information out of him about his brothers because he said, I won't rest until my brothers are avenged. And it's an Italian thing.
Right.
But
maybe that was Lombardo's brother, I think, was a lawyer. Chuck, I think you and I talked about that. It was
Yeah.
okay. So that was, I
It's-
knew.
I don't think it's his brother. I think it's one of his relatives, though. Because
Okay.
I know his brother Rocco's not a lawyer.
no, it's a cousin.
Okay.
Joey has a lot of cousins.
Don't they all?
Chuck, what was, what was your experiences with Tony, if you had any?
Usually when I had interactions with him, I was usually around someone that irritated him greatly, to say the least. So I had a different version of Tony. Red's right. He was quiet. He was polite until you pissed him off. And Red was probably very fortunate because he had a personal relationship and friendship with him, so to speak, not to have seen him when he was angry.
Mhm.
Tony had a bad temper when he was angry, in my opinion.
If he popped up on my door, everybody used to call before they came over except him. But when he'd fly into town, if he came to my door, I'd look at him and say, what the fuck are you doing here? And
Yep.
he'd just laugh. He'd just laugh. Can I come in? Yeah, come on in.
See, that's because you had that different level of a relationship with him. It was the same thing with Joe and I. I mean, not everybody knew that I knew Joe Red, and because of the relationship with my mom, and it wasn't nothing illicit. He saved my mother's life. You know, you've seen the podcast. And I always was treated differently by Joe than other guys were,
I
Nick.
had a different relationship with Joe than you did for
Yeah.
one reason. I remember one time that I thought I was going to have a problem. I got whistled in. My father had started game rooms down in the Loop, Gussie Alex's territory.
Yeah, and they were gonna shut him down.
Yeah, well, they wanted to talk to me first because at that time, my name was the same as my father's. I was only a junior, but I didn't carry the junior. What my dad did was when he was over at Empire or Alley Midwest, when he was buying machines,
Mhm.
he used Joey's name. And they whistled me in because he thought it was me.
Yeah, like, what are you
And
doing?
so when I got in, I had 5 businesses running at that time. When I got into the meeting, it was at Jimmy Kozo's. Joey said, shut everything down. He said, whatever you own, shut it down. And I looked at him and I just went to the telephone and told everybody shut down. And they asked questions, employees asked questions. And I said, shut everything down, period. So when everything was shut down, he says, is it done? Yeah. Okay. He said, now call your father. Because I told him, I said, I'm not there. That could be my dad. And I called my dad. And I told him, I said, you got a problem. And I said, you got to shut that place down. And the other place too. And it was called TG Games. It was pinball machines and video machines, whatever. So anyway, it was on the Cuneo Estates on the building. But at any rate, my dad turns around and says, fuck them Dagos. He said, I'm not doing nothing. And he hangs up the phone. Well, Joey told me to open everything else up. So I called him back up. We were only closed for like 15 minutes or something like that. And he put his arm on my shoulder and walked me to my car. And as he walked me to my car, he said, we can't be responsible for what our parents do. And at that moment, he was kind of consoling me, but I didn't know whether they were going to whack him or what was going to happen.
Give him
And
a
I
pass.
wasn't going to ask. I figured my father did it, not me. I'm not in trouble. They're not going to hurt me. And they didn't want to hurt me. Joey was always kind to me. I never heard him raise his voice either. He'd take that cigar of his and point, and that was it. Or he'd
That's all it
blow
took.
smoke rings in the air and say, he was a clown.
Hence the
So
name.
people people said you couldn't joke with him. A lot of people say, "Oh, you couldn't joke with him."
Oh my
Like,
God.
never joke with this guy. I used to joke with him all the time.
That's all he was about. He was, these kids today don't understand, Red. And I get a kick out of these guys, and I'm going to throw a couple names out there. One in particular, this Stacks kid that's out there with Chatting with Stacks podcast. He comes to Chicago last week, and he's going around with another kid who I like the kid. He's okay. He's a good kid. He comes from some good people. And they go walking in Richard's bar like
about DPN.
Huh?
You talk about DPN?
No, but he was walking into Richard's bar and going around like, he knew all these, he was somebody. You know what I'm saying? And you look at him, and they talk about like, well, Joe Lombardo this, or they put all these pictures up. They couldn't have wiped shit off Joey's shoe back in the day, or today if he was alive. You know that.
Yeah.
But the things that like you knew Anthony. These guys were good guys. If you went down on Grandin Ogden today and said something disrespectful about Joe, tell me if I'm wrong. You might not get out of there without a beating if you said it to the right person.
It depends on who you ran into. If it's some punk off the street, forget it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, they don't know.
If it's somebody that
the old timers,
if it's Albie, you might have a problem.
Might have a real problem if it's him.
Yeah,
he's an old man. He's still got people around him.
That's one thing that I think I've discussed with Red and Chuck on our shows, the loyalty and the respect, even though, times come where people had to go, you had to go, that was business, but that was almost looked at so much in life like anything else. If you go into playing football for a living, you might get an injury and it might end your career. Same thing with the mob. You're going into that business. If you have some sort of mess up and it's your fault, you could possibly get killed. You go in knowing that. But these guys had a really, really high level of respect for each other and loyal to each other back in those days. Not nowhere. I don't even know if it's existing anymore, to tell you the truth.
Well, what's funny, Wade, that you'll probably get a kick out of. I know Red's going to chuckle. Red, do you think, or let me ask you, what do you think the chances are that Tony A left his house in River Forest, went over to Oak Park, and put 2 in the back of Sam's head?
0.
Thank you.
0 chances.
Exactly.
I want to tell you something that's odd. Well, never mind. Go ahead.
No, you're right, because that's another thing we hear. We heard some moron on the podcast a couple months ago. That's why Carl started doing it. Carl's is Annette's middle kid. And Carl got so mad. He goes, they're talking about they heard the shots that killed my grandfather. And I'm sitting there, and Carl's laughing because my uncle's father-in-law, Rick Medea, is the one who made the fucking silencer, Red. So anybody who's in the know knows that Mo got popped with a silencer, but yet you got all this over YouTube, all this over the podcast. Oh, I heard the shots all the way at Grandin, Harlem. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me.
No.
I have a question for you. And that is, what do you hope to achieve by bringing this up now?
Up until Joe died, Red, I don't know how much and please don't think I'm being disrespectful, because I never would be. The law is supposed to be blind. Okay. Justice, whether.
No, it's not.
I know it's not.
On either side. On either side of the scale.
You're right. But
people that beat beefs, and I know people that got beat down on the ground.
I agree. I was one of them. Joe, and I know, and I have no doubt in my mind that you'll agree with me. The likelihood of Joey going to anybody to hurt Judge Zagel being a black gang member is about as much as an Eskimo in hell with a snow cone lasting. That would not happen.
You're wrong. You're wrong. It's on tape. It's on tape. It's on tape.
I'd have to hear that.
Well, then you
I'm not doubting you, but I'd have to hear that, Red, because that's not the caliber of Joey I knew. If it's true, it blows my mind to say the least. But
Tell you
what
about
I
Joey.
would,
I have something to tell you about Joey Guy. And this was, I think it was right after he got out of prison. And somebody from the neighborhood called me. Dick Hoyt called me. And he said, Joey's out. And he needed some help with something that I could do for him. Something that I knew how to take care of. He had a problem with his son, who was up in Wisconsin. And so he said, do you think you can help me out on this? And I said, yeah, I can. I said, you could do me a favor too. I said, do you see that guy? Meaning Joe Lombardo. And he said, every day we sit in a restaurant, we have breakfast together. Every day. And I said, do me a favor. I want to talk to him. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. And I called him back. And he said, yeah. He said, call this phone number. And I used an MCI calling card at the time. I said, call this phone number. He said, call this phone number. And when I did, it was a time and date setup. When I did, somebody else answered the phone. It was a payphone. And I asked, is JL there? He came on the line. And I said, you got a problem with me? And he said, no. He said, whatever you did, you must have had your reasons. And he let it go at that. And I said, okay. And he said, look, you don't bother me, I don't bother you.
all right,
I felt very comfortable after that conversation.
sure you did. But my point is they're making the story up that the reason they moved Joey to ADX Florence was because he put paper out on Judge Zagel with a gangbanger from the street gangs.
That was on the internet.
I don't believe it.
It was. At one time, I looked for it and I can't find it, really.
No, I know. I'm saying it was on the internet, but do you really think Joe would do something like that?
No, he was pretty desperate. I mean, nobody was listening to his appeals. His false teeth were gone. Everything, he had a lot of problems, dental problems. He had a lot of things. He was decaying and falling apart in Butler.
Yeah,
So-
but that all happened, Red, when they moved him from Butner. And that was why they
You
supposedly
call it
moved him.
Butler? Bueller? Butler.
I think it's Butner.
Butner.
It's in South, North
Okay,
Carolina.
I've been mispronouncing it for a long time. But
Yeah.
when he was in
I think
Butner.
it's Butner, I think is how it's pronounced.
Butner.
I think there's Carmine Persico done time there as well. It's more of a medical facility, if I'm not mistaken.
Right, that's what he was there for. He had a bad heart and some other things were wrong. He couldn't get teeth. Everything was wrong. And from what I understand, I don't know who the guy was. I really don't. But he was supposed to be a black street gang member. And he told him to make a call and do what he told him to do.
Supposedly.
And the guy made the call. Now, maybe, only maybe, I don't know, because I wasn't privy to the call. I didn't hear it. But maybe the guy said, this guy wants me to do something. And what do
They
you think?
used
Can we
Joe's
do
name.
it? Can we do it? Can we make some points here? Can we
Yeah.
do it? And whatever happened, the DOC or BOP picked up the phone
Call
call
and took it seriously.
and they did take it seriously. That was it. He was gone.
Well, see, when you asked me why I wanted to testify, I think that if I had been, there's a lot of things that we're not going to discuss here. Maybe someday we'll discuss privately. There's a lot of other things that I was aware of that would have basically impeached both of the Calabreses. And you know as well as I do, minor, minuscule thing. Had I been able to get the order,
They tried to, Rick Halpern tried to impeach me a couple times and he just couldn't do it.
but Red, there's a difference between you and the Calabreses.
Very much so.
Exactly. Okay, now, if they would have got an order and they would have brought Hambone up,
Nick Calabrese was so upset when he got on the stand, he couldn't even remember what he had for breakfast.
he pissed his
wasn't used to
pants at
being
the
out.
Fecarata hit.
Yeah, they tore him apart.
That's my whole point. If they would have allowed Rotuno to do his job, brought up Hambone, Mars knew his family secrets was done. Because if they would have walked into that courtroom and said, okay, well, you're saying he's at 35th and Shields, and all we found over there were dog bones. Miceli says he's over here in Evans Field, and we just pulled the body out of there. What do you think the jury would have thought of Nick Calabrese's testimony? Ugats. They would have said, "I fungool," and threw him out of the courtroom. And the other little son of a bitch who stole from his own grandmother, and he was afraid of what his dad would do. And Red was exactly right. His father was mad at him more about being a disgrace to the family name with the drugs, abusing his wife, who's now writing a book about him, I understand.
Lisa's writing it? Okay.
Yeah, I know the author who's writing it. Lisa's writing a book now that I hear is coming out soon. And they turn around, and if you look into a few things, when they went into the house, one of the things that Frank Sr. knew about, that is, the guys don't, they don't tell everything they know. He knew that he was stealing from Sophia. Red,
Yeah.
you knew the kind of man, you may not have known him well, but you know the kind of man Frank Sr. was. Stealing from his mother, I would, St. Peter's.
His mother's money. He used to hide that down there and behind in a false wall. He hid his money down there in a false wall.
But
so the grandmother didn't take anything, and he didn't take anything from the grandmother. He took from his father's money.
But the grandmother never touched nothing, no. But he still went into his grandmother's house that his father entrusted to her and violated her home. You know how them old dagos think about stuff like that, Red?
Well, I'm sure she was living there rent free.
Well, the building was in her name, as I understand it. But the point is, that was her home her whole life. And here's this cokehead punk gonna go into his grandmother's home and steal from his own father, and then he's gonna think there's no retribution from that. And okay, hey, I got a daddy issue. I don't think there's anybody out there that's got a bigger daddy issue than I do. Okay, mine and I don't get along. We get along, but we don't see eye to eye about a lot of things. And would I ever turn my dad in? Not in a million years. That's between me and him, father and son. My son and I got issues. There's things my son does I don't agree with. There's things I've done my son doesn't agree with. Would my son ever hurt me? No. This guy is the lowest form of pond scum that I've ever seen in my life, because even if he had the issue with Frank, it should have been between him and Frank. Why did he have to throw everybody else in the meat grinder?
Well, didn't Frank also claim to be at the hit where Tony and Michael were killed? And by that, I mean Tony Spilotro and his brother Mike.
That's
Not
bullshit.
that I know of. Not that I know of.
That's bullshit.
Okay.
Nobody was there except the guy that did it. And the guy, I was only told by Schweiss that the guy that did it was Tony. Now, that's just hearsay because it came from Schweiss. It is on videotape, though.
No, Red, I think you're misunderstanding. He asked who was there with Tony when they whacked Tony and Mikey.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about Sam Giancana.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
Yeah. We're on two different people there. Yeah, I was talking about Calabrese saying that he was there when Tony Spilotro and his brother Mikey were summoned down to Bensonville.
No way.
He wasn't high enough on the food chain for that.
You got that right.
Okay, so both of you are in agreement that he was not there for that. And I think and I've talked to both of you guys, on the show and in private. I think you're pretty close to everything being pretty similar on that. I think the only difference was, Chuck, you had a difference of opinion who may have called that to set that up.
I do. And like Red knows the things Red knows. I know some things that I know that I would love to talk about right now, but because that motion is sitting in front of the judge and that letter is sitting on the judge's desk right now, I don't want to taint my testimony, because if they do allow me to testify,
I'll say what I have to say. I do not believe that he was there in any way whatsoever. I also don't believe that, because of the people that were there, like Louis and some of the other people that I physically knew. I saw them, they came to talk to me all the time. maybe not all the time, but maybe 5, 6, 7 times. And it was a congenial. It wasn't a tough guy attitude. They didn't come on to me tough.
Right.
Nobody came on to me tough. Nobody. And it wasn't because I was feared. It was because they liked me. I was easygoing and I was a good earner. And I never complained about anything. I always took care of my own business, never asked for help. I took care of everything that I needed to do. If it meant, shelling out a little bit of money to the guys on the street, I did. Whatever I had to do, I did. But on the other side, Chuck, I wrote a book. I didn't go through an author to write it. I wrote it. I wrote it myself. And everything in there is fact checked. And I named John Rotuno in there. He's the best agent that I ever worked with in my entire life.
I feel the same way.
John was close to me.
John took a lot of heat because of me. And no matter what, I don't care. Even if John said he didn't believe me, which I know he has his own personal opinion about things. He feels that we got screwed just as much as I did, but he's got a pension and a job and all that to look after and a family. And
he got divorced. He got divorced, guy. He got divorced a long time ago.
Well, when I knew him, I don't want to put his personal business out there, but I knew there was some issues.
Kathy's got to be in her mid-20s by now, or late 20s.
Yeah, well, like I said, you may have that latitude to talk about his personal family. I don't.
His wife?
Well, I mean his wife and his daughters, but I know John he treated me like a brother and like a son. He respected my mom. He protected my mom. There's a little known thing that's going to come out in some podcasts, but you were probably down south then, Red, but do you remember that Bulls party that when they won that last championship up here in Chicago, that last three-peat? They won the last three-peat. The Chicago Copper was running down Harlem Avenue, and he decapitated an 82 or 85-year-old lady drunk. My mom and my stepdad were the eyewitnesses to it. CPD was leaning on him. You name it, people were making threats. And there's an article in the Reader newspaper you can look up about it. And when John approached my mom, because of my mom and Jim being the only ones that wanted to step up and help, put this piece of drunken shit away for killing a poor old lady in Elmwood Park. My mom and my stepdad were very, very apprehensive. John had to literally move them out of an apartment at 11 o'clock at night because when things started to come down, some people took it the wrong way. And you know how that goes. Threats were made. They were verified that they were viable threats toward my mom and my stepdad. John left his home himself with a team and moved them. Their dog, their cat, my mom, my stepdad. There's nothing in the world that if Rotuno asked me to do, I would not do for him.
How did he decapitate that woman you're talking about?
He was drunk, Wade, and they had a big Bulls party behind a police district called Area 5 here. The cop's name was George Wilson. And if you go look up, it's called Reader newspaper, READER. There's an article in there about George Wilson, and it lays out the whole story, how my mother and stepfather were threatened and intimidated, windows broken out, tires shot out. If you testify, if you ID this guy in the lineup, what we're going to do to you. That's how dirty some of those Chicago cops were. Now, there's a lot of good Chicago police out there, and I support them. I support my brothers wholly, even though I'm not an officer anymore. But this was an exceptional piece of shit. And he got very little time for killing the lady. I think he got less than 4 years.
I mean, what did you do? Hit her with a car or something? Or
How many times in Chicago? You know how many homicides a day there are in Chicago?
Today, too many.
Even back. You go back 10, 15, 20 years. How many homicides a day? Everybody told me that was on the job. If you really want to get in trouble, they dump you to the Deuce, 2nd District. Because there were so many homicides going on there every day, the guys just hit under the viaducts.
Yeah. Well, this guy they had the after.
On the end of Deuce, you didn't leave.
Well, this guy, there was an after party at Grandin Central. About 17 of them got lit up. And then this guy was doing, I think it was like 80, 85 down Harlem Avenue. This poor old lady was coming out of the Walgreens that was on the east side of the street, and he hit her, and he hit her so hard he decapitated her.
Wow.
And he just kept on going.
So it was a hit and run.
Off duty, yeah. Then he went to his house and barricaded himself in and didn't want to come out.
That brings me to a question when you were just talking about, the murder rate in Chicago, obviously right now is extremely high. How
Back then
was
it
it?
was too, Wade.
That's
Back
what
then
I
it
was going to get there. Back, how was it when in your day, when you were coming up? Was it as bad then too?
Homicides every day. Homicides every day. Usually it was all over the city. I mean, it could be in Fillmore, it could be anywhere, but there were homicides every day, all the way out to Jefferson Park. It didn't make any difference.
Yeah, but Red,
There's only a couple places where there was a low crime issue, and that was usually up by Saga, up in that area.
Yeah, Jefferson Park, Norwood Park, 18, 19, all up there. But Red, wouldn't you agree with me? The stuff that's going on, like just, robbing, pillage, plunder, the Magnificent Mile. If Tony and Sam and Joey and them were still alive, do you think that would be going on in Chicago and it wouldn't be checked?
No way.
Thank
It
you.
wouldn't have got this far out of hand, number one.
Exactly. I tell people that every day.
That's
And they look at me like I'm nuts.
That's what I was going to lead into. Do you guys think that them being there and in the power positions that they had helped at least keep it at bay for, a period of time? Out of those guys that you just mentioned or any Chicago heavyweights, who do you guys think, and you can have your own opinions and they can differ, of course, who do you think held the most power in there?
At the time that I was around, the most power I saw was JL. JL, the Grand Avenue crew was kind of leading the city. As a matter of fact, when we went over to Taylor Street or Chinatown or whatever you want to call it, they were pretty nice to us. There wasn't anybody over there. There was no attitude or anything else. Same as Rush Street. As a matter of fact, I know a couple people that were related to Joey that had joints on Rush Street. And there was no thing like back when Caesar was alive in the 70s. It's kind of like it was engulfed. That area was just engulfed. That Grand Avenue crew was very powerful, very powerful. When Joey went away, it all started falling apart.
Chuck, what do you think? Who do you think hold the most power?
Well,
Or held, rather?
it would depend on the time era, like Red said. If I was to say the most powerful person that was in the Chicago outfit ever, hands down, in my opinion, be Sam Giancana. I mean, he elected a president. Okay. I ain't saying he didn't do it without help, but I would say that Mo probably was the most well-connected, most savvy businessman at his heyday, and not so much in his declining years. And then I have to agree with Red. Joe was liked by everybody. Joe could be the statesman that could go in. And what you got to understand, Wade, and we talked about this before, and I know Red's going to probably agree with me. It's not like New York here. You don't got 5 families with 5 bosses. You got one guy calling the shots. And if you don't listen to that fucking guy, you go. That's simple.
Mm-hmm.
It's, what I used to get a kick out of, I used to see all these guys moving to Oak Brook and moving to every place else. Joey stayed in the neighborhood for a reason. He didn't use his house to, he didn't go down to American Bonding anymore. He went over to Kozo's place. As a matter of fact, I believe, I don't have evidence of it, that he financed building that place for Jimmy Kozo. And there was a lot of things that were done there that were just outrageous. Mikey Switek, the guys I used to see around all the time. Mike just passed away, I believe, last year, if I'm not mistaken. But
a lot of guys have gone in the last 5 years. I can't believe how many have gone.
Yeah.
It's Red. It's over. Everybody says, is there an outfit? There's always going to be hangers on, but your era.
kick it up to? Who they kick it up to? Tell me that I couldn't come right in there and open up a bookmaking operation and nobody would bother me. Who's going to come and see me and tell me I want a piece of your action?
Red, I think there's probably only 4 towns you couldn't do that in. And I think you know what 4 of those are.
Not really, but it wouldn't be Cicero, I'll tell you that much,
No.
because I live there. So I know what it's like. And
Wouldn't be
maybe Elmwood Park, Melrose Park, those places up in that area, yeah.
Elmwood Park, Melrose Park, Stone Park, and probably now Rosemont.
I would agree on that. I wouldn't go into any of those territories. I just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because
Those,
people that
those
are
I think you'd have a problem.
the people that are there are not organized. You don't see organized crime, but you see somebody that you may be leaning on their territory or doing something that they're doing. Maybe they got joker poker machines. Maybe they
Small
got something.
sets.
Right. So if you do, there's going to be violence. There's going to be something that happens. And also there's not the control. So I do not see the outfit's presence like I used to. There is no outfit. The outfit is not organized. There's no organized crime like that. If it is, it's the politicians. Like Joey said when he was sentenced, if there's anybody that's guilty here, it's the 50 aldermen that okayed everything I ever did. And that was his rolling crap game.
Now, what you just said right there is pretty spot on accurate. There is still crime going on now. I mean, there's crime everywhere, but I'm sure it's prevalent in Chicago, but there's no more organized crime.
No.
And I know to most people that might not make a lot of sense if you're not into this sort of subject matter, but you know, those guys, what they did, yeah, they done crime, but they kept it organized. It was to a certain extent a business like model. Everything was modeled from a business. That's why you had your boss, your underboss, consigliere, and then you're stepped on down the line. That model was, you know, put in place years before that. And the one person that I want to mention, because you guys, you know, you picked Joey Lombardo, Red, Chuck, you mentioned Sam Giancana, who's you're right. You're absolutely right. His reach was powerful. But there's something that I got to say about Tony Accardo that when I look at all those guys, there's something to be said about holding a spot that he held for a long time. And to my knowledge, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think he ever done
50 years he held that spot.
I don't think he ever done one day in the can.
No.
Now that might not mean you have the most powerful reach, but that means you know what the hell you're doing in that spot to never spend a day in jail.
See, Wade, that's where Red's probably going to agree with me. Tony Accardo is a cutaway from everything else. When you're talking about day-to-day operations of the outfit, you've got your Giancanas, your Lombardos, your Cerrones, your Iupas. Accardo, and correct me if I'm wrong, those guys were all capos, okay? Momo was a boss. In Italian, Accardo was like capo di tutti capi, captain of all captains, bosses of all bosses in Chicago. He didn't get his hands dirty.
We called them street bosses.
Yeah.
We called them street bosses.
Right.
And the reason I didn't mention Sam Giancana is I didn't know him. I never met the man.
Right. Yeah, he
I was
died
off in
pretty
the Marine
young.
Corps. I was off in the Marine Corps when he was in exile.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, he definitely had his connections. I mean, you know, supposedly, you know, and there's the whole rumor of him sitting down with the plot to take out Castro, which I know Castro pissed off a lot of the mob when he went over there and took out a lot of casinos that a lot of those guys were making a lot of money in. I mean, I don't know the whole extent truth to that, you know, never claimed to either, but you know, anytime when you're sitting down with people to a certain extent that want to throw you in jail to try to take out a common enemy has got to be something that's got to speak to your level of your clout for sure.
I think that Accardo's real reason, and he had to give the okay on Giancana. That was his order.
Absolutely.
I had
100%.
Had to give the okay on it. But his real reason, aside from other reasons, there were multiple reasons. It's like Spilaccio being murdered. There was a dozen reasons. I didn't know anything about those things. I didn't know what he was doing or what he planned on doing or anything else because I didn't know. But one of the things that Sam Giancana did was he started casinos in Iran. And when he started those casinos in Iran and overseas, he was making a ton of money.
Yeah.
And I was told by other people, alpha guys, as a matter of fact, JL talked about it one time, Joey Lombardo. He said he wouldn't cut it up.
He wasn't kicking up.
Wouldn't give a piece of it to Tony Accardo.
He was keeping all that for him.
Says, what use is he to me? I thought he was a partner. I thought he was with us. And Sam's argument was, yeah, you exiled me to Mexico. You told me to get out of the country. So I did, and I earned my own money. And now you're going to take half of it because I had to come back here because I got subpoenaed.
Right.
Yeah.
That,
They had their differences. They settled their differences the way they usually do.
but
Right.
you know, Red, correct me if I'm wrong, and you're a little older than me. Don't you think all the moral fiber's gone out of everything today?
Oh, yeah. I was just talking to somebody about that today. As a matter of fact, I was talking to a judge about it. And he said, everything has gone to hell.
Yeah.
He said, what we used to think years ago, what we used to say years ago, our social media, everything.
How we acted,
Pardon?
how we acted, how we carried ourselves.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Like I never dressed like this. I'm dressed very casual. I
Me
wore a
too
suit and
tonight.
tie every day. Every day I wore a suit and tie. I was a businessman.
Yeah.
And I was respected for that. Now, some of the guys that were burglars or whatever they did,
The Panzicos.
Panskos, Paulie Pansko, I knew him quite well. Matter of fact, I gave him a job. There's a long story about Paulie. But aside from that, all the guys that I knew, they dressed very casual, very, very casual. And when I come into the neighborhood, when I would, a lot of guys got chewed out. And one of the things Joey said one time, and I did a video on this too. One of the things Joey said one time, and I'll be a little bit more explicit on this one, was he called everybody together and he had a Dodge outside that was, he had primered paint on it and he was driving it. And he said, if I got to drive that piece of shit, I don't want to see anybody in a Cadillac, a Lincoln, an Electra 225. I don't want to see anybody driving it. If I got to do this, you got to do it too. And somebody put up their fingers and said, what about Red? And he said, he's a businessman. Whatever he does is his business. He pays his taxes. He does what he wants to do. I don't want to hear about him. He's not like you guys. You guys bring heat down on the neighborhood. And that was his neighborhood that he wanted to protect. And because he
Right.
did protect it, the people around it, they would lie for him. They would steal from him. They'd do anything for him because he was always there passing out money, helping people. And he was known as a big helper. He would help anybody with a problem, no matter what it was.
Yeah. A lot of this, I mean, I know it's an entirely different, setup, but a lot of the same things was said about John Gotti. The things he did for his neighborhood. The people in his neighborhood loved him. They rioted the fucking courthouse when he got found guilty.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. The movie, you interviewed Colangelo from the Bronx Tale. I can't remember.
Calogero, yeah. Lilo Brancato, yeah.
Right. That role that he played reminded me, and Sonny in that movie reminded me of my relationship with Joey. Very much.
Okay. Yeah.
Not that he told me to go to school or anything, but he was a friend to me. But yet to other people, he might have been something to be reckoned with.
Right. Yeah.
Red, you remember I know you remember the Godfather movies. Do you remember the scene where the old lady went to Mrs. Corleone about the problem with the rent and the dog?
About the dog, yes.
That reminded me of Joe.
He said, go out and ask my neighbors. Everybody knows me. He said, then come back to me. And he did. He came back and he said, oh, I'm sorry. And he
Here's
says,
your mom. She can stay for free. That reminded me of Joe.
it's Hollywood, but it was kind of enacted. A lot of mob people, not all of them. Not everybody was like that.
No.
Milwaukee Phil wasn't like
But
that. I can tell you that much.
Oh, El Doricio, no. Neither was Harry Alleman.
I don't know
No.
if you guys have know, but the show, The Offer, just dropped on. I think you might have to have Paramount Plus to get it, but it's a show called The Offer, and it's supposedly like the backstory of the Godfather movie getting made and all the stuff that they had to go through to get that film made. I haven't
the
watched the
Glover
episode
family.
yet, but it looks good.
Yeah, I've been seeing the trailers for it. I haven't seen it yet either.
It's still Hollywood. It's still
Yeah.
Hollywood. You know,
Well,
I
as we
look at
all
all
know,
those-
they dramatize and change up a lot of things. I mean, you look at The Irishman, God knows that was a wonderful acted movie by the guys that were in it. But everybody that I've talked to that's been involved in any way in this life, any shape, form, or fashion, have shot holes in that story from one end of that damn movie to the other. And that thing, I think, was over 3 hours long. So that's a lot of shooting.
Oh, yeah.
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 Not to mention, we went on
It's
the,
just like, I want to see when they come out with the movie about Whitey.
Yeah. Well, they did the one with Black Mass with Johnny Depp.
Did they come out with one about Whitey yet?
Yeah, Black Mass. It a star Johnny Depp played Whitey Bulger.
I haven't seen it. I want to see it because when I was down in Florida doing time, I was way down south, and there's 4 protective custody units in Florida, and I was down there with John Connolly.
Mhm.
And like I told you before, John and I used to have breakfast every day, and we'd have our coffee and donuts, and he'd tell me stories about the bureau and what it was like knowing Whitey, and I'd kind of like cry on his shoulder in a sense, like, John, Mr. Connolly, what? He goes, Chuck, that's how they play the game. He said, I'm one of them, and I'm here with you. That's how they play the game. If you're not playing their fiddle, this is their way of doing a hit.
they always deal up. They always deal up. They don't deal down.
Yep.
Mhm.
Like Schweiss told me one time, he was getting ready to extort somebody. And he said, how much do you think we should ask, Red? I said, I don't know, 10,000. He said, are you out of your fucking mind? He said, we're going to ask for $1 million. And I said, $1 million? And he said, yeah, we can always come down on the rent. We can't go up on the rent. He was speaking in jargon.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's the same rule about anything. When you ask for a car, everybody always assumes no matter what price you put on that car, somebody's going to haggle you down 2,000 or 3,000. So it's always better to start high. Cause like you said, you can work your way down. The same goes with charges too. When they put charges on you, as Chuck, I'm sure they're going to charge you way high.
Oh my God.
Because they can, drop them down, but they can't charge you here and then turn around and go up above it. They're going to charge high and then work your way down.
Like Joe said, they can indict a fucking hamburger, and what they do is they throw as much shit at the wall to see what sticks, because they know they got holes in it when they come in the door.
Right.
And they know that guys like Joey or even regular, these gangbangers today got top lawyers like, Joe Lopez, and these guys come in there and they bang, 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 they shoot holes in the case. So they got to have 20, 30 counts because they're praying to God to get out of there with 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, appeals. Joe Lopez is very good at appeals. Very, very good at appeals.
Mm-hmm.
I don't always agree with Joe's attitude, but Joe's Joe. He's a colorful person.
That's the one. He's in Florida, right?
No,
he's
he's
in Chicago.
Oh, Chicago.
Yeah, he's up
Okay.
by Taylor Street, up in that area.
Well, guys, we're closing in on 1 hour and 20 minutes here. Is there anything, Chuck, that you would like to ask Red that maybe you've heard in conversation? Because to my knowledge, you guys have never actually had, like you said, I would call this somewhat of a face-to-face. Do you guys have any questions for each other that you may have heard that somebody else said? Like I said in our podcast, Chuck, I'm not really about using that traveling information type thing. I'm the type of guy that likes to cut to the chase, talk to the people that were involved. And if there's anything that you guys want to ask each other that you may have heard that somebody said that this one said, and to maybe straighten it out and put it to bed, because I want to commend both of you on this podcast. You've been very professional, but if there's anything that you want to ask the other one, feel free.
Red, the only thing I knowing that a lot, you knew Mitch better than me, much better than me. Why did he never go after Jimmy Deleo? Do you know?
I don't have the answer to that question, but what I do have is a comment for you. I heard you say that he probably knew he was dying. I was with him every day for 2 months before that trial. We all thought he had a sore throat like I have right now.
Yeah.
And we didn't think anything else. He thought the same thing. Now, when I met him in the very beginning, when I wrote about it in my book, who was the guy? Tom Moriarty called me.
I know Tom.
You know Tom? Okay, Tom called me. Tom's retired.
Yeah.
I think he's alive still, but he got remarried. But
Haven't we all?
Tom called me and said, Mitch wants you to give him a call. And I said to him, give me a call. Why? And he said, he can't call you. So I called him. And I said, Mitch, what do you want? And he told me, he said, I want to talk to you about this, that, and this, that, and this, that. And I said, I have all the transcripts. And he said, well, ours got damaged. They're mildewed and everything else. And I said, well, I have all the originals, not originals, but copies. And so he said, we're going to need some of these for the trial. And I said, okay. And he said, is it okay if I send a couple of investigators down? And I said, don't tell me they're FBI. I'm through with the FBI. Don't even tell me that, Mitch. And he said, no. These are new guys. He said, believe me, it's a new FBI now. It's a new FBI. So he sent down Chris Mackey and Ted McNamara. They both came down.
Ted, but I don't know him.
Chris Mackey's in Boston right now. I just called him 2 days ago. But anyway, I called Chris and we were talking about this. And so they came down. Perfect gentlemen. They treated me like gold. And I think Mitch told them to. Then after they talked to me, Mitch came down. And he had his little thing. And I ran home, got my copies of my transcripts because we met at a hotel. And after I got my copies, he looked at them. He says, boy, these are in pristine condition. He says, what happened to them? And I said, I kept them in a safe. It was a water retardant safe. Had a little thing in there that soaked up the water. And he says, ours are falling apart. They're garbage. They were kept in the basement someplace,
Jeez.
And we actually talked it over. And that was in 2001. So for him to actually know he was dying or know he was ill and deliberately persecute somebody, to me, is ludicrous.
Well, in 01, I agree with you because that's the year he signed my proffer. I just don't know what happened to Mitch between 01 and the end of the trial or the year he passed away. And like I said, Red, I will never speak ill of the dead. I question the decisions he made as a prosecutor. I don't know why he didn't just talk to me and sit down and say, Chuck, I can't tell you what's going on, but this isn't going to get swept under the rug. Because there's, Red, you have more contact with these guys still than I ever will. There's matters of honor.
Stay in contact with me. They stay in contact with me.
I know.
They call me.
I know. And they're all probably going to watch this. And
Not really. They don't watch this stuff.
yeah, and some of them do. And I say to them the same thing I'd say to Mitch. If God, God rest his soul, I wish him nothing but peace in heaven. I just wish to God they would have been a little more fair-handed, because I think it was wrong that DeFranco slipped a noose. I think it was wrong that Medea slipped a noose. I think it was really wrong that Deleo slipped a noose, because they heard, like I heard you say in one of your, I think it was on your podcast with Adam, you did what you did because you got tired of seeing people get hurt for no reason or something along those lines.
Murdered.
I do too. Red. I feel the same way. I know I may be considered to some people as a turncoat. I never testified against anybody in the organization. Okay.
Chuck, if you feel like somebody's calling you a turncoat, just take a look at them. They're a piece of shit. They're out on the street extorting. They're out on the street doing something that they shouldn't be doing. So if they go away, that's their problem, not yours.
Wade's got some letters I've asked him to post with what he's releasing on our first podcast, and some letters that not too many people have seen before. And I just ask that, especially someone I do respect you, and I do apologize that we had difference of opinion. My father raised me to be a man. I just wish to God they would have listened to me, because it's not right that you pick and choose who gets punished, because every life matters. The blacks got this BLM stuff going on, and the Hispanics got this, every life matters. I didn't know that when I was younger. I was too naive and too stupid. At 55, now I do. And to see people like Medea.
You've never been to war. You don't know. You don't know. You don't see a lot of people dying. You don't know how many people matter. Or the guy down the street, the guy that gets clipped because he's a bookmaker, or he's a.
Yeah, I have read. I've seen more than I can talk about here, unfortunately. And the only one that knows that for sure is Rotuno, what I've all seen. But there's a couple that just stick in my craw that I think need to be dealt with. And what happened in front of Emma and Joey, yeah, that chapter's almost over, but there's a little bit yet to write. And while he's still alive, I'd like to see it written. And just to answer your question, is you keep asking me what I want out of all of this. Red, they called me a liar and a con man and a thief. Now, what happened to me with my business in Florida, it's a long story. Someday maybe you and I can chit chat together off the air, but it was a business deal gone bad. And like you just said, when they tell you to pull out, you pull out.
That's right.
And I took the weight. That doesn't make me a liar, a con man, and a thief. And for the last 20 some odd years of my life, I've had to combat that. But what's funny is there's a scale here. I'm a liar, con man, and a thief when it's to their advantage. But with all these letters I've got of credibility that Wade has copies of, Joey Seifert's got a copy of, Scott Bernstein's got copies of, that have taken the time to give me the airtime, and the book and stuff that I'm doing, I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it to lay the cards on the table, just like you did. Now, I don't have the skills. I'm a very good legal writer, but I wouldn't know where to begin to write a book. But the story is going to get told. And I respect what you did because I understand why you did it, because I think you had some of the same motivations I've got, maybe a little different, maybe not. But we did what we did for the reasons we did it for, and we don't owe a motherfucker an explanation. I don't hide where I live.
I give it freely, but I don't owe it to anybody.
Yeah, I give it freely too. I don't hide where I live. I'm not under a rock somewhere. I look at it this way.
Interest out because I don't want the media by me.
Yeah, I don't blame you. You know, they're worse. I rate the media, you know, it's like, I can't decide who I dislike more, the bureau, the media, or lawyers. I can't come up with which one I hate the most, because ain't none of them worth a shit.
The media is definitely up there, because there's times when a certain story is written or a post, when it happens, the media is going to blast it. And just say if it turns out for something to be not true, or it went down the way it said it was, they're not going to go back and retract that fucking statement. So everybody is going to remember that one headline. Oh, I remember reading that. The headline was this. And that's what sticks with people. You know,
Jennifer did a great interview with me at Panama City Beach here, Jennifer. And it was simulcasted with Chicago. Mike Parker gets on, and the camera cuts away from her, comes to me, and Mike Parker hits me with a shot. He said, "Why did you wait 26 years before putting Hansen in prison for killing those 3 little boys?" And I said, "Because the FBI told me to. They told me not to shut up about it." And he said, "Yeah, but you could have done it on yourself. You could have gone and done something."
No,
and I
it's
said,
not that easy.
"I probably could have, but I got myself killed."
Wasn't that the one that Johnny closed? The
Yeah.
Hansons?
Yeah.
That's
Actually,
what I thought.
it was started by Jimmy Deleo, and then Jimmy
Okay.
Deleo gave it to John and Jimmy.
You know, do you remember when they arrested Frank Jane? They arrested him in 01. Red, I was locked up in DuPage with him with the fucking prosthetic here. John's like, let me know if he says anything.
John called me up and he said, "We got Frank. We got Frank. We got him on the arson." And I said, "Good." I said that, you know, if you got him for one thing, believe me, there's 50 things you didn't get him for.
You know, Rotuno always said that. He said, you know, you can't expect to get the whole pie. Sometimes you just got to be satisfied with a little piece of it. But
Keep chipping away at the rock, and eventually it's going to be a pebble.
But what he did for those 3 little boys, I don't think many guys would have done, Red. I don't know how you feel about it, but John was like a tiger with it.
Actually, John was, when I first met John, I looked at him as a young man, and I looked at him and said, I was pacing. I pace when I talk, especially if I have to remember something. And so I was pacing, and he was just writing notes down. He has his notebook out and he's taking notes down. Nothing else. He'd ask me a question, then he'd write. And so when he got up and left, Jimmy Deleo was with him, his supervisor. And when he got up and left, he turned around and said, he told me this later, so did Jimmy. He said, "Jimmy told me, He said, John said, is he for real? And Jimmy said, yeah, he's for real. I met him in 86. He was doing a beef on Mikey Switek and Bambulis. Was a firearms beef and a sawed-off shotgun and a cocaine beef. And I met with him in 86. The FBI was so pissed that I went, because you don't have to go. You don't have to go. I said, I want to meet this guy. And when I met him, he was a gentleman. I liked him. I liked him from day one. The guy had class, but he dug into that. He dug into it deep. And he told me I had to wait for the best investigator he could get when he went on it. And then Jimmy Grady came on board. He was with DuPage County Sex Crimes Unit at the time. He came on board. And after he came on board, they went after it like they went after it. And he's another one that told me he did one interview on TV. And he said, I will never do another interview again. And his comment that he made during the interview was, the only thing that bothered me about Hansen dying was the fact that he died too soon. He should have suffered there longer, a lot longer for what he.
You know what? The one thing that pissed me off, and I know it pissed John off too. I don't know if you ever met Tommy Ahern. He was the press agent. He's related to a news reporter, Marianne Ahern. Okay. He went out there telling, when Fox News, they had all cameras everywhere when we went out to Evans Field, and they caught a glimpse of a camera lens, and they thought it was, they called it over the headpieces. We think we got a sniper in the tree, and I almost went down on the ground and into the mud, me and John both. And then they got the all clear that it was a fucking cameraman. Tommy Ahern is standing there lying to the media. Oh, we're out here looking for machine guns. Now, how do you start an investigation? Could say, oh, I can't discuss what we're out here for. It's an ongoing investigation. But he goes out there, tells him, I didn't tell him about no fucking machine guns. We're out there looking for bodies. But
it's the media. And that's what I try to stay away from, the mainstream media.
But you know what the schematic of that is, though, Red? Once the ATF press agent tells the media that, it becomes true, even though it's the biggest lie there ever was. And then who's got to wear it? The poor bastards like you and me.
Well, John initially quit because Joe Plemons, it was the Helen Brock murder. Joe Plemons passed a polygraph saying that he was the one that put the last shot into her head. And he was independently calling me. As a matter of fact, he wouldn't tell me at the time. He trusted me. He said, Billy, he always called me Billy. He said, Billy, I don't want to compromise this thing. I want information from you about this, about that. So if I ask for somebody, I have another source that I'm going to. And Joe Plemons passed the polygraph. He put the whole case together, brought to the state's attorney's office, organized crime division. They shot him down.
Let me guess, Mary Lacey and a guy named Cassidy.
No way are they going to do it at all. And he said, that's when I made up my mind, it's time to retire.
When we were out in Evans Field, Red, when he called Pat King for the okay to make it a crime scene and he didn't get it, John went to Scott Cassidy and Mary Lacey. And
Scott Cassidy, good friend of mine, very good friend of mine.
And you know what they told him? You know what Scott and Mary Lacey told Johnny? We already got a call from the U.S. attorney. We can't touch this.
That's common. That happens.
Yep. Doesn't matter what the truth is.
And that goes,
they want to play.
That goes deep. Before we went into this interview today, I was watching the new Marilyn Monroe documentary on Netflix that was just put out. And I think that's one thing that attracts people to these types of movies and these types of stories is it's not just organized crime by itself. Organized crime spawns into so many other different factions, politics, presidents. I don't think that anybody organized crime wise maybe had Marilyn Monroe act specifically, but I do think it was an organized group effort. Maybe not too many people were upset. Then you got the Kennedy assassination itself. Then you have the casinos, and out in Vegas and Bugsy starting that whole thing. They're so woven into a lot of different things that it's hard not to be enamored, at least as a viewer, with this types of stuff. And I think that's why movies like Goodfellas and Sopranos and, you know, Casino and Irishman do so well, even if they're not 100% factual. Guys like you two, y'all know a little bit more than the average bear. But the guy, you know, I'll even use my state here in South Carolina, is not going to know a whole lot of difference. So he's looking at this movie thinking, oh, wow, that's a good movie, and thinking everything went down like that, when we know it didn't. It was close, but, you know, we know it didn't. But it's just, that's how much of a, I guess you can get enamored with this whole story and this lifestyle, which is, and I'm actually kind of break news here, and I've spoke with Red about it. I'm got a project in the works where it's going to be specifically highlighting guys that were portrayed on film to be a certain way. And I'm going to speak with either the person, if they're available, if they're not dead, or someone that was very close to them about the difference of how it was portrayed on film to how they were in real life. Cause I think that's something that a lot of people need to see, that, you know, maybe this guy looked this way on film, but he wasn't this guy. Maybe worse, maybe better, something like that. But that's actually something I'm working on coming out here soon.
Yeah, and your organized crime angle on Marilyn Monroe, I think it was Frank Schweiz, wasn't it, Red?
Yes, it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was. Read the book, Crypt 33, Milo Spillegro. And I spoke in 1989 or 1990. And he asked me if I would come on a book signing tour with him. Now, his partner, Gregory, she says it never happened. But I know it happened, and people around me knew it, because I said, what do you think about this? And they said, you can't do that. If you do that, you know, you're going to be dead. So you can't go out and authenticate what was said. Now, just recently, I spoke to somebody, didn't speak to him, I typed to him, that was related to the Pappases and Eugenia Pappas. And that's how it all started, through Eugenia Pappas being murdered by Frank. That was his girlfriend at the time, 18 years old.
Yeah.
But at any rate, they know, some people know, they know what happened. We all know what happened. The order came down from Johnny Roselli, I believe, with the CIA, to Giancana. Giancana gave it to Milwaukee Phil. Milwaukee Phil gave it to his bodyguard, Frank Schweiss and Tony Spilaccio. And they went out and did the job.
Yep.
And I knew the way that it was done way before it was publicized, and it was documented. It was documented
in her keister, so it hit her bloodstream quicker.
Right. But they didn't check that. They didn't check that at all.
Oh no, are you kidding? That would have
this documentary that I just watched, and I don't know if either of you guys have seen it, but there was reports saying that an ambulance came, picked her up, took her to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, realized that she was dead. There was nothing they could do. Then turned around and took her back. And all this happened around the times of like 11 to 12. Well, the housekeeper was the one that called the 911, and that call didn't come to like 3:30 in the morning.
And
so
she disappeared.
Yeah.
She's gone.
Yeah. So that's, yeah. But wasn't there a report also that Bobby Kennedy was there that night?
Bobby Kennedy was there. So was Peter Lawford.
Yeah.
Peter Lawford was there.
Peter Lawford's heavily mentioned in this documentary that I just watched.
And he was driving Kennedy, and he was stopped and got a traffic citation on the way home.
Yes, I watched. I forgot what it was because I watched so many of these TV shows.
Sedation of some kind just to calm her down.
Yeah, that guy said that he pulled over Bobby Kennedy that night in a car with him. He said another guy, I don't know if he named him as Peter Lawford, might even been 3 guys total, but I know one of them was Robert Kennedy. He stopped that night in a very close proximity to Marilyn's house.
Yes, it was on the 101.
Wow.
Going back towards Lawford Place. He lived in Malibu, I believe. I'm not sure, but he lived up in up the road a ways, quite a bit from Brentwood. Brentwood was more towards the Hollywood area.
Wow.
Beverly Hills. But that's a whole rabbit hole you don't even want to go down.
Oh yeah, I was about to say that's a whole nother show right there. We could probably do for sure. But I mean, speaking on this show, man, I think we're at 1:45 here, so we're gonna wrap it up. Gentlemen, I couldn't thank you enough for coming on this show. I think a lot of good ground was covered here. I think both of you guys finally getting a chance to meet and speak with each other as best we can through virtual this Zoom meeting. You know, you got to kind of tell your stories. And like I said, you know, Chuck was kind of real early when you were in the midst of doing what you were doing, Red. Then when, you know, when it was time for you to get on out, that's when Chuck
was
was
a
getting a
different
little
era.
bit more involved. Yeah, different eras. So as we know, it don't even need to be a different era now. It can be a month later. Stories change dramatically. So you can imagine whole different eras. So I'm glad you guys got to sit down and talk, and, you know, hopefully some errors cleared on a few things. Like I said, you guys can still have different opinions on individuals. That's your own, you know, own issue. But as far as some of the other subjects, I'm glad that some things got cleared up, and I can't, you know, tell you gentlemen how much I appreciate you coming on the show.
God bless you both, Red, and good health to you.
Let's see you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I am Hollywood Wade. That was Chuck Miceli and Red Wemette. And unfortunately, we are out of time. Tune in next week for an all new episode of Crime and Entertainment. Thank you, guys.